All right, what more is there to say? We've got a video. This is from the React channel in Discord. If you have a video you would love for me to watch, relevant to this, irrelevant to this, etc., go to my Discord and go to the React suggestions and put it there. A lot of this stuff comes from the React suggestions, and you have my thanks for doing that because you give me content that I might not have seen otherwise, and we like seeing things and having content. So let us watch one more thing. It's a nice little 30-minute video about how games hide horror inside of the ordinary. This is another one beautifully given from the Discord. So once again, if you do have any video that you think would be entertaining, make sure you go to my Discord and put it in the React suggestion, because once again, it is very appreciated, and I might see things that I might not have seen prior or ever due to your knowledge of them where I don't have. So thank you very much. This is from Daryl Talks Games. I'm curious where this one will go, because I, in fact, love horror games, and I love when horror games do a good job of horror. And I'm interested to see where he goes with this. No major spoilers for the games discussed, by the way. Written to encourage you to go play. Very cool.
There is a section in Silent Hill: The Short Message where you are prompted to find a book from the school library. And as you search, you will probably notice that a lot of these books simply say "Learn" on the side. A few say Sapien, Oceanview, German. If you've ever used a library, you'll know that books of the same title and author tend to be in the same section. They aren't scattered across bookshelves randomly, at least if the library is any good. But that's what we're given in this chapter of the game. Now, many of you who have played a game before know that when developers have to cover a ton of wall space with a lot of textures, and it's not just a wall, they understandably have to take shortcuts by blending stuff in and reusing assets. And it really seems like this is what a short letter is doing. The book Learn is almost procedurally generated to appear every few books with a slightly different color to appear random. German is blue here, but red here. Sapiens is doing a triple bunk bed thing with 2 other copies here, but that one in the middle is teal, so surely we won't notice. And if we were given a boss fight here, an encounter with a large feathered monstrosity that is taking place in a library for some reason, maybe we would notice. Our eyes would be on that. But we're told to go find a book, which kind of directs the attention to the seams in this blanket, doesn't it? Of course, the game does highlight with the button prompt the unique books that we are actually supposed to find, but even if it doesn't really bother you, you can't just not notice this content-aware copy-pasting of filler book textures, right? But it might bother me in particular because recently I played Alan Wake 2, a game that does not spare any details. This is an alleyway early in the game. Each little piece of graffiti, each scrawling of the word scratch is significant to the story. The movie posters refer to a character Alan has written in his books. Backdrops are slathered with ideography that'll become relevant later. We go down into the subway, more scrawlings about another plot point yet to come. Nothing is wasted, not even directional signs. This could just be normal street indicators, but at a glance it reads, "Don't sleep again." This kiosk doesn't just have generic shapes and illegible floor info. It specifically serves the purpose of haunting the player, further illustrating Alan's descent into madness. At some point you find this book, which is a callback to Remedy's 2019 game Control, but it's not the book I want to show you. It's this little pack of cigarettes in the background you probably missed. Super strong, black pyramid brand. In Control, there is a switch that opens this shelter door. Most games simply have an unlabeled button or a lever for a door, maybe some out-of-focus text on a monitor. Here is what you see in Control. To increase room security, these safe rooms are shielded with magnetite. Some people might experience disorientation, nausea, dizziness, or in extreme cases, heart failure when wearing a pacemaker. Fun fact, magnetite will actually fuck up your pacemaker. In Quantum Break, you can stumble upon this chalkboard that tells you not only the name of the first manuscript that Alan writes in the first game, but the next two he will write in the second. It also teases this symbol that appears in both Control and Alan Wake 2 and mentions something about an AWE, a significant plot piece in Control. Quantum Break came out in 2016, well before either of those games. This is a plaque in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. And I don't bring up these comparisons to dunk on games that don't go to this intense level of detail for simple writing on the wall. Rebirth has been incredible, the shortest level of detail.
For who among us has touched the foundations of this world and deemed them solid? Wrong button. Among Us?
For simple writing on the wall. Rebirth has been incredible. The short message was deeply moving and heartbreaking in many ways, and it even has some notable in-universe graffiti of its own. I make this comparison to illustrate the point that the games created by the good Finns over at Remedy Entertainment are simply on another level when it comes to creating the devil in the details. It's not just that they use the little things effectively, it's that they polish them to such a degree that when you look close enough, not only do you not see the seams, you find entire microcosms that only fertilize your fascination with this world. You see, the Alan Wake games, Control, Quantum Break, and possibly the Max Payne games, depending on who you ask, are all connected. Individual pieces of the Remedyverse. These details aren't there just for the sake of making a pretty game. The little things you find are strategically placed to become relevant later or to recontextualize your understanding of these stories in some way. Whether it be carefully crafted textures,
This is so fun because, like, when you look at details in games, you see the deliberate nature in them, because it's not like the scratches of a book or the tears of a page. They have to be put there. These aren't just like natural things that are the occurrences of time and life and earth. Like, somebody has to deliberately put things there. So finding little details in a game is so satisfying because there is an intention there. Like, everything's intentional. The placement of objects, the details of objects, the words given on a page, it's fun. Because, like, once again, the flaws in a person or in the person's room or the mess in their room, that's just the effects of living. But that doesn't happen in a game. Games are made and intentionally made, and the details within them are purposely put. You know, it's fun to break them down and see them.
Copious amounts of uncanny found footage, musical sequences written by an in-universe band that are always a critical plot point with lyrics that directly echo the subtleties of the story, or the fact that there is an entire fully produced 20-minute short film that is both completely optional to find and extremely missable in Alan Wake 2 because, fuck it, that's just how we do it here. Remedy games have completely blown me away with how willing they are to let the subtext do the heavy lifting. You can pick one up and shoot stuff while you enjoy the trippy visuals and badass musical sequences, or you can take a closer look and find yourself hopelessly lost in an ocean of interconnected madness. These games make me feel how I imagine Kingdom Hearts fans feel, except, you know, minus the big sigh when you ask them to explain the lore. These journeys are exceptionally detail-oriented, and that's what I want to talk to you about today. And it truly does start with being extremely detail-oriented. Because the stories in each of these games leave so much up to interpretation, it begs you to lean in closer to fill in the blanks. It dares you to go find a book, so it has to hide its seams perfectly so that they don't take you out of the story. If we go back to the short message, there was a really well done sequence where the walls are plastered with cruel remarks on sticky notes. And it's a powerful moment, to be sure, but the longer you stare at these notes, the more you begin to notice how it was done. You can see that every instance of the word loser is written exactly the same, all caps, 2 exclamation marks, center of the square. Every note with crazy is torn exactly the same, cutting off some of the C. Take your pick, you'll find the same conclusion. It's clear that a couple of notes were written and copy-pasted to fill the walls. But if you try to do the same thing with this hotel room in Wake 2, you won't find 2 sheets of paper that look exactly the same. Even though the written content is almost identical, you get the sense that someone feverishly scribbled each and every single one of them by hand. And that's because someone likely did.
That's some
This
solid
is Sam
polish.
Lake. He was the guy you saw dancing at the Game Awards and the creative director at Remedy Entertainment.
Some
That board
absolutely
I mentioned
solid
from
polish.
Quantum Break, he wrote it himself. In fact, he's done quite a few of them in his games.
Quite a few of Remedy game projects, there are bits and pieces in there that I have created. In Control, there are a number of whiteboards in different research areas on all kinds of theories. I did multiple whiteboards, wrote them full, and they were photographed and put in.
And this has sort of always been his style. Back in Max Payne 2, he hand-wrote these crayon drawings you can find that sum up the events of the first game, and it's clear that this philosophy of using small, missable elements like this has found its way into all of Remedy's work. The vision of Sam and the other developers doing this, in my opinion, can best be illustrated in a non-Remedy game, the Stanley Parable. One of the things that made this game such a goofy experience is how, despite the narrator being your main source of instruction and story beats, when you play, you can't help but feel like the game has something even more important to say through its environment. This sign, for instance, planting the idea that you could break the rules even more by jumping from the lift. This PowerPoint displaying sarcastic social commentary about the workplace and following directions, further echoing the game's meta-narrative. Little touches like this, though missable, feel like
Great
the
game.
world itself is whispering something to you. And that's what the vision was for Alan Wake 2's Dark Place. They hand-painted so much graffiti and designed so much material that is related to Alan's psyche because they wanted to, in lead environment artist Nazareno Urbano's words,
And we want to create the feeling that the Dark Place is talking to Alan and the player.
the physical and sometimes metaphysical places you visit in these games are all built like this. There is a main narrative that is communicated through dialogue and a sub-narrative lying just beneath the surface that is told in the environment itself. Bright Falls is where you'll spend your time in the first Alan Wake, and there's just simply no one normal here.
Should
There's
I
a
play
woman
these
who
games,
is
chat?
so terrified of the dark that she goes around town obsessively checking to ensure light bulbs in every building are regularly replaced.
The bulbs will need changing soon. You can't change them in the dark.
There's a waitress who is enamored with Alan and his books. If you check her house, she has a mural of him over her bed. There are TV sets scattered throughout Bright Falls that play a program called Night Springs, silly little skits full of dark humor that seemingly have nothing to do with the plot. Yet you can't help but watch and be haunted by their potential significance as you continue. The oldest house in Control is a living, breathing paradox. It shouldn't exist. Impossible architecture abounds. A jukebox is being held under maximum security. She's only just arrived and been made aware of this, but Jesse is now the director. The house knows this and has morphed to reflect it. She is portrayed in frames around the building as director in a picture that she has never taken. There is a room inundated with sticky notes. This file says, "Something caused a sticky note to duplicate in my office. I will be working from home until this is resolved." This is easily one of the strangest places in a game.
Oh,
ever,
I've
and
seen the clip
if
with the
you remove
fridge.
the main story entirely, it is simply fascinating on its own. And you could say the same for Bright
The
Falls
guy who
and
can't
either
stop
Alan
looking
Wake
away from the
and
fridge.
The Dark Place. And I don't think these settings would work as well as they do without a good reason to look closely at them. This library isn't as glaring an issue if you aren't told to go find a book, and in the same way,
Yeah, he said
without
that
these
there was
plots
no
being
major
as
spoilers
complex
for these
and
games.
enigmatic as they are,
He said these aren't any, they don't give any major spoilers because the purpose of this video is to encourage the watcher to play these games, is basically what he said. The what? One of the few clips I've seen of Control is this, where you stumble upon this room of this guy who's begging for somebody to replace him because the fridge can't go unwatched. And if it's like a fallen angel, where like if somebody looks away, like it's like an SCP. It's like Peanut, where when somebody looks away, it moves. A weeping angel, sorry. But because the premise of Control is chaos or something happens, nobody comes to replace this guy, so he's like passing out from exhaustion and is freaking out. And I don't know if you can fail this or not on purpose. I don't know if it's intentional to just, it messes up, but if you don't help this guy, or like, I think you can turn off the lights or something, it kills him.
Easily one of the strangest places in a game ever, and if you remove the main story entirely, it is simply fascinating on its own. And you could say the same for Bright Falls and either Alan Wake and The Dark Place. And I don't think these settings work as well as they do without a good reason to look closely.
I've never played, so I don't know.
This library isn't as glaring an issue if you aren't told to go find a book. And in the same way, without these plots being as complex and enigmatic as they are, the environment would feel like a minor factor in these games instead of a major player. You see, these stories in Remedy's work, although well written, are not cut and dry. You get a lot of answers, you get a lot of closure.
Implementing the need to explore the environment and its details is so important for a horror game to really encapsulate the situation you're in, because it makes you have to immerse yourself. It's literally such a good way to get somebody to invest emotionally into the game. Because basically asking somebody to detail themselves into the game itself, like, helps that person, like, once again, ultimately invest. And that's what makes a horror game a great horror game.
But your understanding of the true nature behind the supernatural forces at play is always just out of reach. That's what makes these places so captivating to interact with, because they are your window into everything you and the characters simply can't ever fully know. There's this indie game called The Exit 8, right? The premise is simple. You're trapped in this sort of limbo, this liminal space of a subway station. Every time you come around this corner, you're met with the same scene, a hallway with a stranger walking down it. You can go back, but, well, you see the problem. So to escape, you have to keep your senses sharp and look closely for any anomalies, anything about this scene that doesn't look quite right.
Ooh.
If something is off, say like this door handle being in the center of the door, these posters ever so slightly growing, or this man suddenly smiling for some reason, you have to turn around. If it's normal, just keep going. Do this correctly and you'll progress. Do it correctly 8 times and you can finally leave. But these details are only made important because the game necessitates that you find them, despite how unsettling they can often be. It's a very Fatal Frame in that regard, requiring you to stare what's frightening in the face. You're forced to take a closer look at the ordinary, and the more you stare,
exactly what I just said,
realize how much is staring back at you.
Exactly what I said about how
Marco Miyuku points out that the style of horror Remedy likes to employ is the everyday weird, things that look just perfectly fine, then a twist comes and you're like, okay, what's going on here? And I think one of the most powerful ways that this is done is in that eerie sensation that comes from drawing connections between details. This is the Oceanview Motel, a place that you'll frequent a lot in Control. And like many other things in the oldest house, you never get a full explanation of what exactly it is. You pull a cord 3 times, the motel appears, you ring a bell, solve a weird puzzle, get a key, open a door, and then after 3 more cord pulls, you've moved into a new place in the oldest house. There was nothing extraordinary about the motel itself. You're always just passing through. It's just this place in between places. Jessie describes it as the average of all the motels she stayed at on the road over the years.
Have we been here before? No. I've stayed at a lot of roadside motels across the country, on the road, on the run, under the radar. This feels like all of them, like something recognized from a dream.
Now there are some peculiar things you notice, like how these doors with the symbols are always locked for some reason. You come here several times throughout the game. They still don't open. They never do. Why include them if there is no purpose? And when I first played this back in 2020, I kind of filed this away as just another weird thing the oldest house has to offer. Last month, I'm playing Awake 2, and then I hear this on the phone.
Come to me, Oceanview Hotel. I left my room key for you. It's right there on the payphone.
This spooked me because while I knew it was a control reference, while I knew that it was likely the same place Jessie had been, I also all at once realized how much I didn't know, how little Control had explained. But this game used little details and discrepancies to play with what I thought I understood. That was a motel, this was a hotel. This was grand on the outside, not some cheap place to stay off the highway. Again, the dark place teased me. The address was 3 Cord Street because of course it was. Just another subtle way to contrast how close I felt like I was to understanding what the Oceanview was with how hopelessly far I truly was to fully grasping this cosmic anomaly.
So cool.
Being here created a sensation in me that I can only imagine Alan felt, an uncanny familiarity, the same one that Jessie had felt. As a man of his fame, this was likely the average of every hotel he had stayed at over the years promoting his novels. This place was somehow everywhere Alan had been, and yet somewhere he had never been. It was a place I had become familiar with, and yet was somehow completely foreign. There were enough eerie similarities to make me feel like I had been here before, like these same locked doors that serve no purpose in this game as well, yet still so strange.
Same
and
symbols and
alien
everything,
that I
yeah,
never
wow.
felt at ease. It's for this reason that the Oceanview is probably my new favorite location in a game, because it's a beautiful moment of ludonarrative harmony where I felt exactly how I imagine the main character is feeling. And I realize that this sort of only works if you play Control first and have a preconception of the Oceanview Motel, but Remedy does this sort of thing on an individual game basis as well. There's this room you enter in the hotel as Alan that does something hotel rooms don't usually do. You don't really have any
Birdie, can I help
context
you?
for this vision, and it doesn't seem to be related to anything currently going on. A radio cuts on, and this song is playing. The signal is bad, you can't really make out the chorus, but it weaves a piece of itself into your subconscious. Neither of these things mean anything now, but later on in the story, they certainly will. You finally find this place as Detective Saga Anderson, and you faintly recognize it. You hear that song properly and swear you've heard it in a dream before.
The overlap is at the point.
Of course, this example assumes you play the game in a certain order. For most of the game, you can swap back and forth between Saga and Alan at your leisure, so maybe you've seen this first. But it goes both ways. Little subtleties in both routes echo into the other to make your encounters with the supernatural feel exactly that. By far, my favorite moment in the first Alan Wake is this part at the Anderson house. The place belongs to these old guys from the diner at the beginning, the Anderson brothers, Tor and Odin, formerly members of the 70s band, the Old Gods of Asgard. You find them again when you are later touring this special needs facility. We're told they have dementia, and they are squabbling nonsense between themselves while playing this board game. Tor is waving around a squeaky hammer. It's both adorable and a bit sad. But moments later, Odin pulls Alan to the side and insists that he go to their farm because he'll find answers there. Not exactly reassuring coming from these two, but sure enough, you go, and after flipping the breaker in their house, you hear this record skipping downstairs.
Of course, we need to find where it's coming from. That's the message the Andersons talked about. That's the whole reason we're here.
Lady of the Light? Oh, that's gotta be what's-her-face, the crazy lamp lady from the town.
The Lady of the Light is, of course, the old bat from the beginning that was shaking the light bulbs, and she is who you'll have to go find next. And it's hard for me to fully put into words why this was so damn cool to me. You know, it would have been really easy for Odin to just tell Alan to go find Cynthia Weaver. It would have been really easy for most games to toss some dialogue at you and then put a destination on your map. But the fact that you find out the next toss some dialogue.
Where have I seen this? What is this? Metroid Dread.
At you and then put a destination
Shows it in the
on
bottom
your
left.
map. But the
That
fact
was, like,
that you
weirdly
find out
familiar.
the next step in this bizarre adventure somehow through the lyrics of a song that was written years and years ago just makes this all feel so grand, so frighteningly serendipitous. And the song itself, if you ever listen to the full thing, is actually incredible. It's a tremendous song, and fittingly, it's not the only fully produced Old God song that directly interacts with the plot. I won't spoil the ashtray maze in Control or the Dark Ocean summoning from Wake 2, but in both instances, music from this band has power. It bends the world to the protagonist's will. Much like the forces of darkness, it also has agency. And it gives these haunting and terrifying stories a beautiful undertone, that despite how vicious the forces of darkness are portrayed, the human spirit in the form of pure badass rock and roll is every bit as mysterious and powerful.
That's how you reshape destiny.
I hope this sounds as awesome as it sounds in my head. The Old Gods of Asgard are a completely fictional band. They are portrayed by the real-world group Poets of the Fall. But every time they work on music for these games, you'll notice that the lyrics are always directly applicable to the plot. This is another of those little things that Sam Lake is adamant on. When they were producing Alan Wake 2, Remedy held a songwriting camp for several artists. They were trying to find songs to play at the end of every chapter of the game. And much like the work they've done with Poets of the Fall, Sam had one rule for the artists involved.
The lyrics need to be about the story.
He even brought in poetry he had written about the characters to help inspire said lyrics. And again, this idea of every little possible element of the world tying back into the story is what gives these games a hauntingly larger-than-life feel, like you'll never fully grasp all of the complexity behind this world, like you're constantly viewing a vast, gaping universe through a peephole. There's a lift you ride in Control where Ati sings something in Finnish in the background. The song is called The Hero's Tango, and the lyrics translated describe the events of the first Alan Wake and parallel them to Jesse's journey. That short film you can easily miss in Wake 2 is called Ilten Yö, Nightless Night. It portrays this strange collection of events that, depending on how you interpret the true nature of certain characters, either explains a lot or calls to question what events of the game are even real. And all of these completely missable details beg the question, why? Why spend such a gargantuan effort hiring actors, recording lines, professionally producing these songs and films and Easter eggs that most players will completely miss? Why go to such depths to flesh out the subtext? And the answer, I think, lies in this poster you find in the diner of Wake 1. When I was looking back at the footage I had captured,
Coffee World,
it rattled my
need.
mind that over 10 years ago, even a minor detail like this was included. The foresight to know that in Wake 2, this Coffee World area was going to be a big chapter of the game, right down to the creepy coffee guy face. Then, I was sobered by the fact that this was the remaster version, so I went to go find footage from the original in 2010, and sure enough, no poster. This, as well as a few other things, were patched in to tease the sequel. Initially, I was disappointed by this, but then I realized that this is a perfect example of what sets Remedy apart. Sam Lake has gone on record effectively saying that back when Quantum Break was being produced, that Alan Wake 2 probably wasn't happening. Remedy posted this update video sometime before this explaining that effectively, Alan Wake wasn't bringing in the revenue they were counting on, so they had to move on to something new. But despite this, Sam says that half the fun of actually getting to Wake 2 all this time later is going back and making the details fit.
Yeah, it would be fun to say that all of this is figured out perfectly years in advance. But I also think that there is a lot of fun to be had in this work, looking back and finding interesting ways to connect it.
And to me, it's that willingness to paint a world that feels so incredibly congruent, right down to the tiniest details that gives it this enigmatic aura. This is a stack of scripts that were drafted before the final Alan Wake 2 story was finished. This might have been patched in later, but this wasn't. It was there in 2016. These games don't explain everything, which might be irritating to some, but by using the level of detail and deep foreshadowing that they do, Remedy has earned the right to be cryptic and allow all of us to speculate because history shows they deliver. And this is tough to pull off because there are some games we've all played where the writers left things to interpretation or didn't explain everything about the world, but it just doesn't work. Maybe it feels like they wrote themselves into a corner or just didn't explain certain things due to a lack of production time, and it takes you out of the story. But somehow not having proper answers for how this world works feels correct. It feels like you shouldn't. These stories are so rigorously fleshed out and written that you don't get the sense that the writing fell short, but more so that the forces at play here are truly just too much for one person to grasp. Like, the longer you stare at them, the less you really know, like they're forever just out of reach. This quote from Sam regarding Control, I think, says it best. We were taking the genre of New Weird, this literary genre which takes this approach that we're dealing with things we don't understand fully. It can't be explained satisfactorily and handed to you like, here's the answer and this is what it's all about.
Well,
Balancing that, you still have a very strong idea yourself that it's about these things, but then having that constraint of never spelling things out. Walking that tightrope so everybody has enough to piece together and form a theory, but not so much that we take away the opportunity to do that and just hand the explanation to you. I find my interest sparked when something is well made and it feels to me like I'm not quite smart enough to understand everything. He admits that this style of writing is not for everyone, which I think we can all agree with. But to me, as outlandish as the events of these stories are, they're strangely reminiscent of reality. You will simply never have answers for everything in your life, in the world, the people around you. You know it's all real, you know it's impossible to know everything, but not knowing something doesn't make it any less true or frightening. And to me, that's what is portrayed in these games. A bizarre, warped reflection of our existence that illustrates how complex it can be at its lowest and highest moments. Life isn't a lake. You can't see it all from a hilltop. You can't reach the bottom. It's an ocean.
Epic.
Hey there, you. Thanks so much for watching today. I'm happy to finally get this video out because ever since I played Control back in 2020, I knew I had to write about it at some point, but it just never found its way onto my desk. After filling in the blanks with Wake 1 and 2, I just had to go for it. I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed making it. If you like what I do here and want to support the show, consider joining my Patreon. For $1 a month, you can get all kinds of bonus content like editing live streams, updates, creative input, bloopers, and even your name in the credits like you see here. You might even be mentioned as a featured patron like these lovely folks. Kaito, Shannon Blue, Chris Torrey,
Whoa.
Clint Walsh,
The more money people.
Keenan Ward, Retronox, Dara Marshall, and the Great Swedish Fish. Let me know if you've played any of these games down below.
Highly recommend these games. Yeah, I'm gonna have to give them a look. That was a pretty convincing argument. I love little stupid tiny details, especially when they're actually purposeful. You know, good reacts.